Divas, welcome. Welcome back. Today we have a Reporter Roundtable for you. And my special guest is Steve Bousquet, opinion editor of the South Florida Sun Sentinel. A lot of you here in Tallahassee and certainly in South Florida are very familiar with him and his byline. He has been around a minute. We have a conversation. We go all around the state. We'll talk about the presidential debate and the impact on Florida and discuss the second gentleman's visit to the state. Talk about an amendment that hasn't got a lot of coverage that would make school board races partisan and what's going on in condo land down in South Florida. So please join us. Reporter Roundtable coming up.
If people really are enthusiastic and really motivated about this election, then we should see a turnout that approaches 80%. 80 Republicans will be voting. And so for all the rhetoric we're hearing about how, it's an important election and it's the biggest election of your life and all this other things, I'm waiting to see voters demonstrate that.
You're listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida. Let's dive in.
Divas, it's been a minute since we've done this, but we are here today in the Terracotta Room with my old pal. I mean, old as in we go back a long way. Steve Bousquet, everybody in Tallahassee knows him, and South Florida knows him. He is the opinion editor of the South Florida Sun Sentinel. So welcome to Deeper Dive for this week's Reporter Roundtable, Steve.
Thanks, Dara.
We had the debate this week. That was something I don't usually watch all of the debates, but I like from the beginning to the end, I actually watched this one all the way through. For some reason, I had extra coffee that day. Tell me what you think the impact of the debate will be, if any, in Florida.
I'm skeptical that it's going to really change a lot of opinions. I think Kamala Harris won the debate clearly. Trump really did take the bait. She was really adept at getting under his skin.
She just dangled it, and he bit every time.
She got inside his head, and so he was really knocked off kilter. And she made it look
strode over there. She walked over there. She power walked over there, shook his hand, and introduced herself and pronounced her name very slowly, from the get-go.
And she made it look so easy. Now, I mean, I am seeing in the 2 or 3 days after the debate, seeing some criticism of Harris that she was in those split-screen reaction shots. She appeared to be sort of acting a little bit. It was a little bit too performative for some people's taste. That's commentary by this pollster, Frank Luntz, who's on CNN a lot. I've seen his.
He's pretty conservative, isn't he?
He is, and I think he's a pretty astute guy. So,
he is.
But Trump did poorly, and Trump didn't talk about inflation.
Before we move on that note, we are the navel gazers, professional navel gazers. Frank Luntz certainly is, the CNN folks are. Is the average person, like 3 days afterwards, are they going to be paying attention to whether she gave him the side eye, whether it was a practice side eye or not? I mean, does that really matter?
Probably not. But I think what I do believe is the case is, even though now they're saying 67 million people watch the debate, that's a huge audience.
It is large.
But they're still showing clips 2, 3, 4 days later. And so these clips get reinforced in the public mind a lot, especially that thing about immigrants eating cats in Ohio.
Okay, that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. But before we get to that, tell me what Trump didn't do or what Trump did do. I interrupted you.
Sure. Trump reacts badly to any poking and prodding of his ego, like your crowds at your rallies aren't that big. He can't resist taking the bait on that. He can't see through that. He should have talked more about inflation. I think inflation's a legitimate issue with people. He didn't bring up housing affordability in any sort of meaningful way. He didn't push hard enough on the issue of where I think Harris is vulnerable, which is, hey, you've been in the Oval Office for 3.5 years. All these problems that are festering, what did you do about them?
Right.
I think that's a point on the minds of Americans as well. So.
I thought he did score, like when he mentioned like he mentioned bacon and eggs. Like I thought that he should have gone really hard on that because people are talking about the cost of bacon and the cost of eggs. Like groceries are a lot more expensive. Again, how many times for how many years have we been saying it's pocketbook issues? It's still pocketbook issues. It'll always be pocketbook issues. Then there was also the criticism that it was 3-on-1 that they helped her by doing some of the fact checking. What do you think in general about fact check? I saw the CNN debate where they didn't do the fact checking and everybody was saying, he got away with saying things that were untrue. I don't know how, as a journalist, you can allow someone to say that babies are being executed after birth and not challenge them on that.
Yeah, no, it's journalistically irresponsible. This is the main criticism of Trump and the news media, which is Trump is allowed to just blather on endlessly about stuff that's not true. Another example is if you vote for Kamala Harris, she's going to confiscate your guns. He said that several times. That's not going to happen. They said that about Barack Obama repeatedly. Barack Obama didn't confiscate anybody's guns.
Right.
So it's the media has got to be able to live fact check Trump. Now the ABC anchors were criticized for not live fact checking Harris with the same level of aggressiveness, but Trump lies a lot more.
Well, the lies maybe are more egregious and easier to catch, like, the execution of the babies. And then we'll go into what you brought up, the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio, which I did watch a very long clip of from PBS. I think it was Frontline. Maybe it wasn't Frontline. Maybe it was just the NewsHour. Had a long segment from Springfield. And the part that I saw was like the factory manager loves the Haitian workers and wishes that he could get more Haitian workers. And anyway, but tell me, I think probably your region, Broward, Palm Beach, Miami-Dade County might have more Haitian density than any other place in the United States. Am I close on that?
I think so. I mean, Haitian Americans have been coming to South Florida since the 1970s. I remember covering in the early 80s these stories of these horrible stories of these boats washing ashore.
I went to high school and middle school with some Haitian immigrants.
The characterization that and there has been a large influx of Haitian Americans in Springfield, Ohio. It's been widely reported.
Yes. I think 30,000 or 20,000 something. And
lost in the fog of this is the incredibly outrageously insulting characterization that immigrants, the point of making this thing about eating small animals is that they're somehow subhuman, somehow. That's what I take away from that. Anybody who's been in Broward...
It's a racist trope. Let's call it what it is, right? I mean, isn't it?
Yeah. Haitians have made huge positive contributions to the economy and to a lesser degree, the politics of South Florida,
and cultural, too.
They have. They're small the business owners. There are many, many Haitians. There's a Haitian American Democratic Club in Broward County, has been for decades.
Well, I was wondering what the Haitian community in South Florida, what their response has been to these remarks, because, the Haitian community isn't monolithic. They tend to be maybe more conservative. We have a Haitian American Republican, not from your area, state legislator, Bernie Jacques. Are you hearing any pushback? Is there any outcry? A lot of times when people are targeted, when a ethnic group is targeted in a negative way, we have fallout where it becomes dangerous for people of that ethnicity or that ethnic group in other areas of the country. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I haven't heard much. But, Congresswoman Sheila Sherfilis McCormick is Haitian American. State Representative Marie Woodson of Hollywood is Haitian American. And so I think that this is just, to Democrats, this is just an extension of Trump's aberrant, outrageous, unhinged behavior on just another issue.
One of the things I wanted to talk about with you is I had Democratic National Committee Chairman Jamie Harrison on the show last weekend, and Florida. He's making he's bold on Florida, is what he said. You and I have been around for a while. We've seen Florida go from a Democratic majority to a Republican majority in power in government. We've seen now the Republican voter registration edge is now, I think, over 1.5 million voters. The Democrats kind of poo-poo that. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that gap. But second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, is coming to town this week. This episode will come out after his visit. What does that mean? Is Florida really in play? Where is Florida on the national map?
I don't think Florida is in play in the sense that people mean it as a truly competitive two-party state where both parties are investing a lot. But it doesn't mean that things can't change. They can change very quickly. And Emhoff is coming to the Villages to do a rally on as we talk today, and that's going to really motivate a lot of voters. It's going to make people think that the state's in play. It's probably a bit of a head game again with Trump, that we think we can make inroads in the Villages. I think they can make inroads in the Villages. That story in July that went viral of the 500 golf carts, was really interesting. I've done a lot of stories in the Villages through the years, and I've been there many times, and it is strongly, dominantly Republican. But because it's such a big place, there's a lot of Democrats there too. I don't think it's a good idea for Democrats to create false expectations with people.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and so just take it, one day, one news cycle at a time. And the thing is, if it were truly a competitive situation, you'd see much more evidence of a ground game by Democrats. The problem is, let's look at this U.S. Senate race between Rick Scott and Debbie McCarcel.
People are asking me about this from other states. Many people are asking me if she really has a chance.
She has an outside chance. But the point I was going to make was it is so phenomenally expensive to advertise on TV in this state compared to, say, another state where Democrats have a chance of picking up a Senate seat, might be, well, they've got to hold on to a Senate seat in a place like Montana or New Hampshire.
Well,
these are much, much smaller states, incredibly cheap. You could advertise probably for $1 million. You could probably get on the Fort Myers and Gainesville stations, but you can saturate the state of Montana for the same amount of money.
We have so many media markets too. I mean, it's such a large state. People who don't live here don't really realize just geographically how large it is. And the media markets, there's several media markets that are very expensive, as you say. That's one thing. To me, in play, I was looking back. We were talking about this last night. Val Demings, there was a lot of enthusiasm for Val Demings, former congressman, congresswoman. She was the sheriff, right, in Orange County. Great kind of campaigner, great retail politician. Ran against Marco Rubio 2 years ago and lost by 17 percentage points. She got clobbered. So does Florida, quote unquote, in play mean Debbie McCarcel Powell loses by 6 percentage points, or 9% in the single digits rather than double digits? Is that kind of the calculus?
Probably. I mean, I don't know. The polls suggest that it's closer than that. You got to take it with a grain of salt. The difference, the caveat to me is this is the first time Rick Scott has had to run on a presidential election ballot. And so what's the difference? The difference is it's a much higher voter turnout. It's a whole lot of free agent type voters who are only out there to vote in the presidential race. And, assuming, as most people would, that Donald Trump's going to win Florida, but not overwhelmingly, does Trump have, for lack of a better term, coattails to sort of carry Rick Scott over the finish line a little bit? The fact that Rick Scott's opponent this time is, and I'm just trying to think of his last races, Rick Scott has never had a female opponent in an election where abortion rights is a really big issue in the election. That's a dynamic that's really you really can't get your arms around that completely. I've heard of this scenario that some political operatives are advancing, which is be very close, watch very closely in races where a Democratic woman is running against a Republican man. And the Senate race is an example of that.
I see.
I mean, as it is, it's a conventional thing among politicians that a woman has 1 or 2 percentage points up on a male candidate. As we know, more women vote than men. Women are much more reliable voters than men. That's an absolute fact. So, anyway.
Well, Rick Scott also has one thing that is an advantage to him, and that's a checkbook. So, I mean, we can expect him to, I don't know if it's happened yet, but he has written 7-figure checks to his campaigns before, and I don't see any reason why we would think that's not going to happen this time around either.
I would agree. That's going to happen, and he's got to be favored because he's an incumbent. It is really difficult to knock an incumbent out of Congress or the U.S. Senate. That is not an easy undertaking. Look at Val Demings and Marco Rubio.
Right. Let's talk about some other races, key legislative races. The Democrats are in a super minority. I guess I should say the Republicans are in a super majority in both the House and the Senate. Are you watching any key legislative races? What do you think the Democrats' chances are of eroding that super majority this year?
Well, they're slim, but it is possible to do it in the House. I don't think it's possible to do it in the Senate. And you and I both know from years of doing this that the Senate is really still, the dominant legislative body. It's where a lot of major decisions get made. It's where more of your experienced legislators are.
40 Somalian warlords.
Right. Not to minimize the House. It's a co-equal. It's a 2-branch legislature.
Right.
And so the House is equally important. There are 5 or 6 House seats currently occupied by Republicans where Democrats feel they have a legitimate chance to win. A couple of them are in my backyard. I'll just enumerate them very briefly.
Yeah.
One is in Boca Raton, where a first-term Republican named Peggy Gossett Seidman faces a Democrat young lawyer named Jay Schuster, who is far and away the leading fundraiser among first-time legislative candidates. And it's a district with a large Jewish population. It's a district that undoubtedly is strongly pro-choice on Amendment 4, and Schuster is pushing that as an important issue. So that's an important race to watch.
Okay.
Another one is in Miami Beach, where Fabian Basabe, who's had some bumps in the road and ups and downs and controversies, faces the challenge from Joe Saunders, who is a former House member from Orlando, very active in Equality Florida and in the LGBTQ issues. It's mostly all of Miami Beach. This is the race where I think a family member who tried to get on the ballot with a similar name is in that race.
Mo Saunders, his aunt, right?
Yeah.
I think it was Joe's aunt, and then it seemed like a little election chicanery. I'm not sure, but I don't know Fabian Basabe at all, but that is such an interesting character because he's like a celebrity.
He is. Yeah, he was like a reality TV show guy or something.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to not say Desperate Housewives, but I feel like it's that kind of an ilk of a show or whatever. But so who are you picking in that race? Do you have a winner in that race?
No, I'm not. We're not picking anyone, but I think that it's the Democrats are competitive. There's also a couple of seats along the I-4 corridor where Republicans are in office, but the numbers are at least competitive for Democrats. Takes a lot of money. Republicans have vastly more money than Democrats have. It's these races are won or lost on the ground, neighborhood by neighborhood in these legislative races. I think they are House races because House districts are not very big in Florida. It's 120 of them. And so I think my number is in my head is that the Democrats would have to win. They'd have to flip at least 5 seats to get out of a super minority status that they're in. That's a lot. That's a lot to pull off
in one cycle.
Yeah. So we'll see. But they're motivated by the fact that this guy Tom Keene won a special election last spring for an open seat in Orlando. You've got another case. You've got the case of the freshman Republican Carolina Amnesty from suburban Orlando, who's facing a forgery felony charge and is running for re-election.
Does she have a strong opponent in that race? Have they invested in that race? Because I feel like she was weak going into the election because the Orlando Sentinel had done so much reporting on her, the family business.
It's a Christian school,
right?
Yeah. She's got a legitimate Democratic opponent, but I don't think he's raised a heck of a lot of money, and so I think we'll see. But I mean, if he can get, you see the amount of direct mail these candidates are filling mailboxes with. It's stunning. Yeah. And so that's still considered, that's obviously what political operatives think is the most effective way and economically viable way to reach voters.
Well, if you live in Tallahassee, I don't know what state Senate district you live in, but I live in the Corey Simon district.
I do too, yeah.
And I am getting paper. My recycling bin is full every week from the flyers in that race. He's being challenged by Darryl Parks. That's one. I think that might be the only state Senate race that the Democrats are really engaging in that could flip back in what historically had been a democratically held seat, but it was redistricted, and it now includes a lot of rural counties outlying the Leon County area.
Yeah, I know that's the mail in that race is overwhelming, and the amount of money is staggering.
And we'll be right back with Steve Bousquet.
At Tampa Electric, we're proud to provide 99.9% service reliability in blue skies and gray. We're modernizing our grid to increase resilience for the families and businesses that depend on us every day. Year-round, we harden our system against extreme weather by burying power lines, maintaining line clearance, improving substations, and upgrading systems to restore power faster. Because the work we do now means reliable power for a bright future. Learn more at tampaelectric.com/reliability.
And we are back with Steve Bousquet, opinion editor of the South Florida Sun Sentinel. Let's talk about two other issues that I think are big down in your neck of the woods. There's a constitutional amendment, a proposed constitutional amendment that would make school board races partisan. Now, Governor DeSantis had appointed a number of school board members to the Broward County School Board. How did those primaries turn out? What's shaping up in the school board races there? And what do you think about that amendment?
Yes, well, first on the amendment, the Sun Sentinel has editorialized against it. There's already way too much partisan politics in school board races. School board races are evolving into county commission and legislative type races, excessively partisan, outside money, candidates creating political action committees, all the things that have really poisoned the politics of this state, in my opinion. What happened in Broward was two of the Ron DeSantis appointees to the school board ran and were annihilated by really good Democratic candidates. I'm talking about Tori Alston and a guy named Daniel Fogenholy. And so,
who then got immediately appointed to the State Board of Education. So he got a promotion.
He did. Ron DeSantis cannot resist sticking a thumb in the eye of voters in Broward County.
He hates Broward County Democrats.
So, but the voters stood up, and we said so editorially. The voters stood up, and the voters sent a message to DeSantis that we, the voters of Broward County, we're going to decide who's on the school board, not you. It would have been we said so. It, had Alston or Fogenholy won, it would have been a catastrophic political defeat for the Democrats in Broward County. But both those candidates, the voters who were voting in a primary in Broward know what's at stake. So, but what you have now, though, is you have Ron DeSantis trying to influence the outcome of school board races. You have Moms for Liberty endorsing candidates in local school board races that used to be determined by the PTA and the student advisory councils at schools and things like that. And, they've gotten more political. I think that I have a hunch that the partisan school board race amendment is going, if I had to predict, I'd say it's going to pass. It needs 60% of the vote. And if it passes, you're going to have people running for school board with Donald Trump's endorsement and, with the AFL-CIO seal of approval, things that don't have really anything to do with public education. And so, just about every office in the state is already partisan. Enough already, I mean, so that's my.
No, I feel the same way. I guess the idea that schools are sacred and like hands off the schools, that's an old passe maybe thought. Everything is partisan. Everything is tribal now. Everything is tribal.
Yeah. One last point about this.
Sure.
And that is if you keep school board races nonpartisan, then you leave the door open for lack of a better description, but your listeners will know what I mean, a PTA mom. Yeah. A soccer mom feels like, I think I can get elected to the school board. Yeah, a real person, as opposed to a career politician.
Yeah.
And if we go to partisan school board elections, in my opinion, in my prediction, we will accelerate dramatically the role of a school board seat to be a stepping stone to, I'm going to be on the school board for 2 years, then I'm going to run for Congress.
Yeah.
And the whole time I'm on the school board, I will build a record that'll make me a plausible congressional candidate.
Right.
That's bad for the system. That's not good for the system.
Yeah, there'll be a lot of ideological...
Right. Culture war kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Chest thumping.
Yep.
Broward County, politically, it has changed somewhat, but that election, what did the sort of like from the 30,000 foot level, what did the primary election and the school board races and what maybe you need to wait till November, but how has I grew up down there. It was the People's Republic of Broward, right? How has Broward evolved, or is it evolving? What is going on down there?
I'm old enough to know that I wasn't there yet, but Broward County, people don't believe this today. Broward County was once a bastion of republicanism. Broward County was strongly Republican in the 1960s and 1970s. Then the Republicans decided to take all these tomato and bean fields in west of the Turnpike and turn them into condominium complexes. So almost overnight, it became Democratic because those condos were all bought by working class, either Jews or Italian Americans, mostly from New York and New Jersey. When this was happening, that's about when I arrived in Fort Lauderdale in the early 1980s, and I watched that unfold, and it transformed the politics of the state to a large degree because it really made it. Broward County became this overwhelmed. Broward County had a lot to do with saving Lawton Chiles' re-election prospects in 1994. Broward had a big role in helping to elect Bill Clinton, and twice. And so
you had to, back then, to win statewide in Florida, you had to work the condo circuit in Broward County a Democrat.
Now, what has happened now, most of those folks, if not all of them, have passed away, and those condominiums are still there, but they're owned by Latin American investors. They're owned by Canadians. They're owned by the daughters and sons and daughters and grandchildren of the people that I'm describing don't want to live in Broward County. The condos really aren't worth that much, even in an affordable city, a place with a huge affordable housing crisis. And so I think I've drive through these places a lot. They've deteriorated from what I remember. And politically, Broward County is more fragmented than ever because you don't have these condo kingpins anymore. Trenchies are not with us. It's kind of an every man for himself kind of a quality to it.
Right.
There's a much stronger African American and Caribbean American political infrastructure, and you're seeing that reflected in the fact that all the constitutional officers in Broward County now are black.
That's interesting.
They used to be Republican. Now they're all black Democrats. And that is just part of that's the demographic evolution. The other thing about Broward is increasingly, like Dade, Broward is increasingly Hispanic, especially South Broward, Weston, Miramar, Pembroke Pines. These are becoming majority Hispanic communities. So that's the difference. And so it's a little bit less Democratic, but you look at the voter registration numbers on the supervisor's website, and it's overwhelming. Basically, Republicans account for like 2 out of every 10 voters in Broward. The other 80% is either Democratic or no party.
How do they perform, though?
They perform strongly Democratic. I mean, there's one Republican elected official in Broward County. and that's Chip LaMarca, a member of the House of Representatives.
I know Chip.
Everybody else that I can think of, I mean, at the local level, you have Republicans holding some nonpartisan offices.
Right.
But the county is overwhelmingly Democratic.
Still.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
That's today. We'll see. We'll come back in 4 years and have a discussion. But you mentioned one thing, and I appreciate you joining. I know you have things to do, so I don't want to keep you too long. But you talked about the condos. That is a big issue, I think, going into the November elections. It is such a big deal that the governor, Governor DeSantis, had a roundtable about it down in Miami-Dade County. We've talked about the reasons for this condo crisis. It's these they have to do these inspections and reserves, and it's getting very expensive, and assessments. Some of these condo owners are really flipping out about this. It's becoming really approaching crisis situation. The governor said he thinks they need to have a special session on this. Not that long ago, Senate President Kathleen Passidomo said they don't need to have a special session on this. What's going on with the condo situation, and are we going to have a special session?
It is severe, and it is getting worse from everything I hear. First of all, I just want to say a quick sentence of context, which is one of the reasons this crisis exists is because condo boards were irresponsible for a long time and did not adequately maintain reserves for improvements.
Very true. They delayed or they ignored structural improvements and maintenance, and then Surfside, and then the state decided, we need to start cracking down on this.
Right. I think it's generally considered to be a terrible mistake if the legislature comes into town for a day in November and says, time out, let's delay these assessments for 2 years or 5 years. I think there's got to be some sort of recognition that there's got to be some sort of financial assistance of something, of some kind. I don't know. It's a huge amount of money. Back to your point a minute ago about the condos in Broward County. If this were happening in 1988 or 1990, you'd have busloads of condominium residents outside the Capitol refusing to leave until something happened. So again, the politicians are getting away with the fact that the condo populace is not as cohesive and well organized politically as it used to be. And it is, by the way, let's be honest, it is still the people who, quote, live in the condos, they tend to be Democratic. They have Democratic voters more than they are Republican. In South Florida, they are.
Yeah. But you've got people living on a fixed income there, especially the ones that are aging out, but they're living on a fixed income. And if you get an assessment for $20,000 per household, something like that, I mean, they just don't have the resources to come up with that kind of money.
No, they don't. And by the way, the day after they get the $20,000 assessment from the condo board, they get a letter from Citizens Property Insurance. They just got kicked out of Citizens,
right.
So they've got to get a more expensive. I mean, there's not much more some of these folks can take, and they are living on fixed incomes. A place like Century Village in Pembroke Pines, which is still a big, big place. I heard a lot of horror stories about people getting, notices for $1,000 a month assessments that people can't possibly afford to pay. They risk losing their homes. These people are in their 60s and 70s, and so it's a very, very difficult situation for a lot of people.
Do you think they'll have a special session?
I think if DeSantis wants a special session bad enough, there'll be a special session. But, you know this. I mean, without doing a special session around the time of the organizational session is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Because you've got all these new members who don't know where the restrooms are, don't know where the 18th floor of the Capitol is, and they're having to push a button and make decisions on something like this. I think this is a problem that is uneven in the sense that it doesn't affect people in the same way all over the state. I don't think the condo assessment issue is a crisis maybe in Pensacola or Jacksonville the way it is in South Florida. Right. That complicates it.
It does. And I think, the regular session doesn't start till March. So they do have time in January or February or whatever if they want to say, like, we did a special session, if they want to take credit for that.
Ron DeSantis did a town hall meeting with condo people the other day.
Yeah.
I got an email that popped in after the event was held. I don't recall watching it or seeing it. I don't know who the participants were or how they were chosen, But, the thing about the condominium voters that is still true is that they're obviously they're older voters. The older you are, the more reliable a voter you are, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. So these people are still politically aware. They're astute. They vote in every election. They cannot be ignored. And they are a huge force mainly in Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach.
If you want to talk about like doing some sort of a financial assistance package, then the problem is we just, right now we're flush with cash. We've got $1 billion, $2 billion or whatever in reserves, but the state economists say that's going to take a downturn in the next couple of years. So, I mean, it could be problematic. I don't know. I mean, I think you're right. I think you can't risk having another Surfside. You can't back away from having to do these evaluations and prepare, see structurally these buildings, like you said, built in the 70s, built in the 80s. They didn't have the same building codes.
No, they didn't. Yeah, these buildings are not in great shape in a lot of places. They're really not, and it's going to require a coordinated response, and they don't have much time, I don't think, and it's not a good idea to do a special session around the organizational.
This is going to be my thing. I'm going to be watching this as going into the legislative session. So anything else that we need to talk about before we wrap it?
Just the fact that the importance, I know it's an old refrain, but the importance of voter turnout. And I mean, voter turnout in November, if people really are enthusiastic and really motivated about this election, then we should see a turnout that approaches 80%. 80. It actually should be higher than that, and it will be much higher than that in places like Collier County and Sumter County. I spent a lot of time looking at these county by county turnout.
Those are very red.
Those are very red counties where you don't need to kick people in the rear end repeatedly to get them to go vote. These people are motivated to vote. Republicans will be voting. And so for all the rhetoric we're hearing about how, it's an important election and it's the biggest election of your life and all this other things, I'm waiting to see voters demonstrate that by showing up and voting.
Yeah, we always hear this like, we did all these many door knocks and we did these phone calls and like, okay, but then like the turnout is lackluster. I want to ask you, a friend of mine, I told her I was going to be doing this with you and she had a question. We talk about different cohorts, different demographics of voters. Who do you think in Florida is going to make the biggest impact? Do you think it's going to be Gen Z, millennials, senior, boomers? Who do you think is like?
If I had to predict, it would be women voters under the age of 30 who are motivated by a little bit by Amendment 4. Mm-hmm. The Republicans are trying to take my rights away. And number 2, maybe they're motivated by the Taylor Swift endorsement of Kamala Harris.
I was going to ask you that. How big is that? I mean, we're too old here, but, I understand that's a big deal.
I think I'd rather have Kamala Harris in my corner than what Trump has Kid Rock as his celebrity endorser.
I think Kid Rock is older than I am.
Okay, so I think it can make a difference. I mean, I think it can make a difference. It's we say this every election, and the numbers just it's true that Republicans have this big numerical advantage in voter registration, but we've got like 4 million no party affiliation voters in this state, and so that's a lot of people, and those people have the ability to change the outcome of an election all by themselves.
Who's going to win in November nationally? Who's going to be our next president?
I honestly don't know. I would not underestimate Trump. I'm just going to say that I would not underestimate Trump's ability to pull the rabbit out of the hat.
I agree with you. I agree with you. All right. Well, we'll have you back on for that. Thank you so much for joining us today, Steve Bousquet, opinion editor, South Florida Sun Sentinel.
Thanks a lot, Dara.
Thanks for listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida, hosted by News Service senior writer Dara Cam, and produced by me, Mike Exline. Music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC. To tell us what you like to hear, what you've thought about the podcast so far, or even just to mention how awesome we are, we have a new email address and we'd love to hear from you.
That's right. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at podcasts with an S at e.newsserviceflorida.com. I know it's a mouthful, but it's podcasts with an S at e.newsserviceflorida.com.